So I'm reposting this video after YouTube took it down after it being up for almost 3 years. YouTube is kind of funny about what they allow and what they don't allow. There were a couple graphic scenes I guess somebody took issue with, maybe reported me, or maybe the YouTube censors finally caught it. So I had to replace those pictures. Also, a lot of people asked me about the rap that I made. Thank God I had to take that down because the producer of it used a underbeat that was copyrighted. So YouTube flagged that also. All my videos got flagged for copyright issues with that song. That's too bad, but I thought it was a good enough overview to get reposted. I'll try again.
Saludos. Once again, this is your host, Gabe Morales. I was the founder of the International Latino Gang Investigators Association when we had our very first conference in Seattle, and I have been sharing information with national gang investigators, including those from Los Angeles, even prior to that, via the Latino Gangs Listbot, and I grew up around gangs all of my life. I first came into contact with Mara Salvatrucha in Seattle in the mid-1990s when I was working at the King County Jail, where I had several reliable informants. I plan a future episode on their evolution and movement into Washington State at a later date. I was very aware of Central American politics through my work with the Centro de la Raza from 1973 to 1982. The Centro was the very first point of contact for many Latino immigrants when they came into the city. It should be noted that when Mara Salvatrucha was first investigated by some authorities, both here and in Central America, and covered by the press, they were sometimes referred to as Maras. But I tried to correct them about their classification from Mara 18, which is a separate gang. From all my interactions with 18 streeters, born both here and in Latin America, they use the term Barrio 18 for their 18th Street neighborhood, and they do not like to be associated with anything that has to do with their deadly enemies, Mara Salvatrucha. I don't know everything, but notice that since the designation Mara was used by some sources, it has now been corrected to Mara Salvatrucha en Barrio 18 or Calle 18, which is 18th Street. There was a civil war in El Salvador from 1984 to 1992. Also, there was civil unrest in nearby countries that forced many Central Americans to flee to the United States, in particular to the Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. areas. The word Mara was taken from marabunta, which is the name of a fierce type of ant. It also was a B movie that was shown in Central America. It is my understanding that Salvatrucha was a combination of the Salvadorian words Mara, for marabunta, and trucha, which is a slang word for being alert. Thus, Mara Salvatrucha means watch out for the Salvadorian gang. Some people feel this term is in dispute, and also point out that membership is no longer made up of just Salvadoran immigrants. According to the 2009 U.S. National Gang Threat Assessment, the gang is estimated to have between 30,000 to 50,000 members and associates worldwide. It is even spread to parts of Europe. And according to this assessment, there are about 8,000 to 10,000 MS members who reside in the United States, many who are presently incarcerated. MS members from El Salvador are very proud of their heritage. So, in addition to MS tats, they may have a tattoo of a symbol of the Salvadorian flag. MS is present in other countries also, so they may have symbols from their home countries. This can be an identifying symbol for their country of origin. Many Salvadorians located to the Rampart area of Los Angeles, which is located just west of downtown Los Angeles. This area also had many members of the 18th Street Gang, which preyed on them. Some Salvadorians formed back, and this is when MS formed. They were first called MS Stoners. Many had long hair, listened to heavy metal, and dabbled in Satanism. They didn't look anything like most of the Mexican cholos in the area. Today, this is why MS still often use a devil's horn sign on tattoos. They would also use the M sign with 3 fingers pointing down to form the letter M for Mara. Early MS resisted taxation by the Mexican mafia, which controls many Hispanic gangs in Southern California known as sureños. For this reason, many MS vets did not put on a 13 on any of their tattoos. Older members also tended to wear black after their satanic roots. Finally, in 1994, after being on the green light list, MS agreed to come under the Sureño umbrella and started put on MS-13. They would also often wear blue. As we'll cover at the end of this video, politics is constantly changing and is changed once again. And it could very likely be that MS in LA will no longer put on 13 after the tattoos and be targeted yet again by the Mexican Mafia and Sur 13 who follow their lead. Thus, officers should use caution when putting these two groups together. There are many different MS cliques in LA, many who spread out to other parts of the United States, and many who are departed to Latin America. There may also be homegrown cliques from those areas that are not present in LA. The original MS clique was Normandy Locals, or NLS. This was around Normandy Avenue, around 8th Avenue. There was also a new clique called Pico Side, which is located along Pico Boulevard, just outside a past gang and junction zone. Another original clique was 7-Eleven Locals. I knew one of the founding members of this clique named Pava Mendoza, who is very powerful in Seattle as well as down in Latin America. He will be covered later on in a video on MS in Washington State. Francis Locals were also one of the original MS cliques. They were located in the heart of the gang and junction area on MS, and many of their members since moved. Francis Street was a small street located just behind the 7-Eleven where a lot of the MS used to hang out. Sometimes MS members will use the words tiny winos or tiny locals as cliques, but they are more names for younger MS gangsters than an actual clique of any gang in LA. In addition to encountering members from these cliques, I encountered several key members of the Hollywood Locals from around Virginia Street and Western Avenue, just northeast of downtown LA, including a few individuals who were some of the first MS documented by the FBI in the late 1980s. Some who were later named in a federal RICO case. Part of this is mentioned in a previous episode on the Mexican Mafia, Part 2, shown on this channel. Another original clique was Leeward Locals, who have moved to other parts of the country. MS can be found in Canada and other parts of the world, especially down in Mexico and Central America. They can be found in Guatemala, Honduras, and of course, El Salvador. One must be very careful when citing information found on the internet about MS as fact. There are a lot of things put out that I have seen that are simply not true. A good source of information for law enforcement is the International Latino Gang Investigators Association. An accurate source for the public would be sites like insightcrime.org. Another good source of information is Robert Bunker and John Sullivan's Small Wars Journal that has covered MS as well as other criminal groups such as drug cartels. Another way to identify which country MS are from is by their area codes. Caliche is Spanish slang used by Central Americans. 502 is the area code for Guatemala, and in Caliche, they're often called Chapines. 503 is the area code for El Salvador, so they are often referred to as Guanacos. And 504 is the area code for Honduras, and they are often called Catrachos. Some MS colors and identifiers in Central America or here may be blue, white, or black. Once again, this may be changing with current friction between MS and Sureños and the Mexican Mafia. Beads may be shown as beads on the East Coast or rosaries on the West Coast. It could also be shown in clothing and bandanas and other accessories. MS is still a traditional Latino gang in that they have initiations to join. This may be by jumping in, by sexing in for the females, or by criming in. It used to be that an MS prospect would be jumped in for 13 seconds. But once again, since they have distanced themselves away from Sureños and the Mexican Mafia, this may change to a different time frame. They most definitely won't use 18 seconds, as that is often used by the hated rivals 18th Street. It should be noted the Latino population here is growing. Not all, in fact, most Latino youth are not members of gangs, but a large number of them are poor. So gangs like MS will try to recruit them. Law enforcement, corrections, and the public, especially parents, need to be aware so they can stay ahead of the MS gangsters. MS may have weekly and or monthly meetings at a house or club. They often have to pay dues depending on the locale. Failure for not paying dues or not following the rules could lead to discipline. Often this means getting beat up, but sometimes it can mean death. They have their own communication websites and ways to pass messages in jail or prison. This can be covert or overt. They also do background checks on members and on officials. They'll put out music and movies to further their cause. Of course, one of their main financial resources is to deal drugs. In the past, they have dealt a lot of crack cocaine, marijuana, and heroin. Lately, Mexican drug cartels have been bringing in fentanyl, and MS are also involved in that. They may work street corners. They may pressure and tax street vendors. They may run nightclubs or after-hours clubs or casitas, which are houses that are often used for gambling and prostitution. Some MS members, especially from Central America, have sniffed glue or paint. Thus, They may have mental issues and can be an officer safety hazard. They often launder their money through legitimate businesses, just like other criminal organizations do. In addition to Los Angeles and California and Washington State, MS is present in other states as well. Outside of the West Coast, they have no longer been putting on the 13th, as they have little to no contract or control by the Mexican Mafia and are often enemies with local Sureño 13 gangs. Per the Central American Programa from the Rampleros, which are shot callers for the Mara Salvatrucha, the 13 is no longer required. In fact, many MS have become more hostile to the Mexican Mafia, bossing them around, and Sureño clicas like 18th Street. So there's been a lot of friction, fights, and disturbances in the Federal Bureau of Prisons. As I've said many times before, I don't put out any current intelligence on gangs, but I decided to make this episode after many papers got the clash at the U.S. prison in Beaumont, Texas, wrong. Let me make clear here. It was MS who attacked and killed Mexican Mafia members and associates. That incident is still under investigation, so I'll say nothing publicly more about it. The important thing to remember is regardless of who is involved, these gangs cause a lot of hurt, death, and destruction in our communities. You can find more out about Mara Salvatrucha, 18th Street, and other Sureño gangs across America in a book written by Andy Eways and myself that is available on Police and Fire Publishing. Until next time, thanks and stay safe.